Earlier tonight, one of the topics was heat pump water heaters, which I agree with Dan, there's definitely going to be more and more of those. I think the technology is really cool. And so we thought we would start off with water heaters tonight.
Yeah.
Mark,
Okay.
what is the most common thing you see in a water heater defect? Gas, electric, pick one.
The most common defect. Often it's going to be corrosion on the lines coming in. But I mean, it depends. You know, you get specific on different units. The hybrids are a little bit. They're newer on the scene. So I personally, I'm on my second one, so I know some of the little nuances to when the actual compressor goes out or something like that. But fortunately, the warranties are pretty good on those. But the trick is getting the right technician to fix it, because it kind of falls sometimes into the HVAC technician to do the heat pump repair. I'm not sure if that helps answer your question, but
It gets us started.
yeah.
One of the things that comes up with the heat pump water heaters is they produce a lot of extra cold air, and that can feel really comfortable, or depending on where the water heater is located, maybe not. I think one benefit of that is that it helps to almost like dehumidify or condition the space that it's
Yep.
in. So it's like running a dehumidifier, but it's bonus. The only concern would be just making sure you got room for condensate.
Right. Yeah. You have to accommodate for that. You can't just drop a heat pump or a hybrid water heater into a traditional water heater space without some kind of condensate pump,
Sump pump, floor drain.
sump pump, right, blah, 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 right.
So I said, Larry, you got your hand up?
I didn't have my hand up, but I did learn something very interesting, or not learn, but just had a first the other day with a water heater. I walked into the house, and in the garage, the ceiling of the garage was totally saturated and the wall was totally saturated. And the realtor was freaking out because she was there last week and it wasn't like that. And the ceiling was starting to cave in. And it turned out that the water heater pressure relief valve was going straight into the wall, and then it went up the wall, across the ceiling of the attic, down the outside wall, and out the brick. And the
I don't think you can do that.
the plumber had visited it the other day and was just looking at it and just tested the water heater pressure relief valve. And what he didn't realize was that it didn't reset. And what happened is it filled up that whole entire pipe. But what had happened once before is because it wasn't draining downhill, it had water in it in the past, and that water had frozen. And when I looked up at the pipe in the attic, it had a freeze burst in the copper pipe. And you all know what those look like. They're totally unmissable. And so the water was just dribbling, and it was filling up that whole pipe and then dribbling out of the pipe onto the ceiling, onto the wall, down the wall, out the light. It was a mess, and is a perfectly good reason why that pressure relief valve discharge line has to discharge downhill. It was a learning example. I've got pictures, and I started to upload them today, and I didn't get a chance to, but it was unbelievable.
So Sonny Swan, I'm being encouraged to invite you to chime in on this topic. Can you unmute yourself? And if you
I would like to. So I'm a master HVAC mechanical engineer. Heat pumps for your heating and cooling for your house draw the heat from Mother Nature. It brings that heat inside. That's why they're so economical. A heat pump water heater takes the heat from the coldest spot in your house, which is your basement, and then uses that heat to convert and heat your water. The problem is your basement is heated by your propane furnace or your actual heat pump. If there's a situation where you have, let's say, a gas boiler in the same room that radiates heat naturally, and you can harness that heat to make that heat pump water heater work, then the numbers work. Otherwise, I have multiple clients right now because of tax credits that have put in heat pump water heaters and they run electric space heaters beside it to create enough heat in that room so their kids can take warm showers. So the heat's coming from inside your house, not from Mother Nature with the heat pump water heater. The second thing is that I don't work on water heaters and plumbers don't work on refrigeration. So when it breaks, you get stuck right in the middle of that line. And I've seen it happen 100 times where the ladies in my office say, we don't work on water heaters. And the plumbers say, we don't work on the refrigeration side. So unless there's a company that does both and you happen to get the technician that works on both, it's not really a good look for me. It's not a savings because you're in essence using your propane furnace or your natural gas furnace or your heat pump to heat the air, and it's sucking that heat away from your house, making that run longer to heat the water. With the exception of tax credits, there's no numbers that make sense at all. That's
This
it.
sounds
Sorry.
like that it's an idea that's slightly ahead of its time and will go through a learning curve and break-in period as most new products seem to do.
I think so. It might be there, and I have customers that have big, 900,000 BTU boilers. And if you put a couple of these beside it, they harness that heat that it's naturally radiating and they repurpose it. That works well. If it's not that house, if it's modern construction, I'm having a hard time as an engineer with the numbers.
And what are
Maybe-
they doing with two 900,000 BTU boilers in the, are these like the umpteen thousand square foot
18,000 square
mansions?
feet,
And they're heating their driveways?
18,000 square feet. It's great.
Thank
She
you.
makes candy. I'll let you guess who it is.
It seems like they should just be using the boiler for hot water as well.
Yeah, they have that.
Maybe you can help me with a little bit of the physics and engineering here, because I understand conceptually the idea of, harnessing it from the earth, but isn't it that the refrigeration unit is trying to compress the refrigerant, and when it expands, it gets cool and we get the refrigerant part from the work of that unit, and the air is coming across that coil, kind of doesn't really matter what the temperature of it is.
Well, the BTUs come from somewhere. So with a heat pump, let's say if it's 50 degrees outside, you're removing the BTUs as you convert from liquid to gas and bringing it inside, and then you convert from gas to liquid, and that releases the BTUs. This is doing it all within the envelope of the house. So you're not stealing it from Mother Nature, you're stealing it from the basement.
I guess
That
I go
makes
back
sense?
to the idea with
Makes sense.
depending on the style of house you have, if it's secondary purposes, it's doing some dehumidification, then it's helping to keep that basement drier, maybe?
I have personally never heard that can dehumidify because there's no air to air transfer. It's all refrigerant loop. And it's really not condensing. I've never looked at how much condensation a heat pump or water heater pulls out. I don't think it's a lot, but again,
It's
they're not
actually-
predominant.
Just owning one, it's considerable. But I have an older home. My house is 1961, so it does actually pull a decent amount of humidity even in the wintertime. More so obviously in the summertime. My house is not airtight by any means. But there is a reaction so there is a benefit in that respect. So yeah, just from my personal experience, I have to have a condensate pump, and it probably kicks on, at least once it fires up after a while, in the morning when the kids are taking their showers, whatever, people going to work. So it's I guess you could couple it with a sump pump or, sump pit or something like that. But anyway,
Dan,
I'm
Blum,
on well. So
Dan Blum, you were speaking on this earlier. Did you want to weigh in on this?
Yeah,
do we wanna
sure.
just move on?
It depends on the situation with this. Again, my house is a 99-year-old house with an unconditioned basement. And it's a really good match for a situation like that. It does, I can't measure how much dehumidification it takes out, but it does run pretty steadily. It's equivalent to having a window air conditioner in the basement, in my estimation. And I think the systems would be definitely more efficient if the compressor was located outside and used exterior air, and then just and the newer systems that I've seen are designed that way. They're only available in the UK right now, to my knowledge, but
So
they
it's
have
like a
systems
a
where
split system?
Yes.
Exactly.
And they are available.
split system with a exterior small compressor like a mini split. And
Yeah.
They're available
They,
in New
they
York.
are designing VRF systems. So mini split is one way. So if you have 3 indoor units, they all have to be heat or cool. They're designing residential VRF. Mitsubishi has one in the works where one of the loops does the hot water, just like you said, but it can heat while the other ones are cooling. So that will come. Right now, the cost is exponential, like obscene, but that will be coming. Where there's a one outdoor unit that connects to 2 ducted indoors and the water heater, and the water heater can heat the water while the other 2 cool because they have 3 pipes instead of 2. But it's in development. I know, and Daikin is working on it too.
Yeah, yeah, I've seen a lot of news feeds on, I think all the major players are getting into that air to water, heat pumps, whatever the case may be. So it's definitely a trend. And I can see it being more efficient having an outside unit, heating the water inside. There is some efficiency or benefits depending on the house, depending on the application where it's actually an interior unit. But again, I think it depends on what you're trying to achieve. And maybe there's some additional benefits, whether it's dehumidification, cooling, whatever the case may be. But yeah, it's getting better every year.
So Nick Stanisic, you're talking about, when you say very loud, are you talking about the compressor? The water heater compressor? Is that what you're talking about? Nick?
Some of them are loud. Some are quiet and some are loud.
Yeah,
like
so that's
almost
Nick
like-
is saying yes.
Yeah.
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 There's a fan that runs
On
when
the
that thing is
compressor.
running. Right. Yeah.
Compressor and a
Right.
fan.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So it's
Yep. So we're gonna move on from heat pump water heaters. Thanks for beating that one down. But the one thing I wanted to ask is, so let's say, what do you tell your clients? What do you put in your report when you have a water heater that's past its useful life expectancy, but it's still working? And what is the useful life expectancy of a water heater? All things being equal.
It depends on who you talk to, right?
Yeah,
8 to 12, 12 to 15,
12 to 15 is mine.
15 to 20 at the high end.
Yeah.
I say 12 to 22, which is a huge range. I
Mm.
know,
Chicken.
but but they will run well past 22, right? I mean,
Some of them will, some of them
some of
won't.
them, a lot of them don't. But and it's also, it's also how well is it running, right? I mean, it may be working, but you look at the unit, is it cranked up to very hot or 140 degrees, but it's only putting out 110? I mean, you have to,
Who's checking?
you are, I am, right? That's what we're supposed to do.
Feels good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hot
Yeah.
water.
Yeah, right. Well, yeah.
Do you ever adjust the water heater temperature?
Only to test it. I don't, no, I leave it exactly where I find it once I'm done. Do you?
No, but I'm saying, but I will adjust it to like let's say I show up and it's on vacation mode.
Turn-
Oh,
crank
yeah,
it-
yeah,
yeah,
no, of
okay.
course, but you put it back on vacation mode, right?
If you
Yeah, if I
remember.
remember to,
Yeah,
but
you're-
if I put my
Yeah,
keys
that's-
there
yeah,
or something.
exactly.
So water heaters, I have a neighbor who has a water heater that's probably 90 years old.
It's probably got a really cool style to it. Like it
Green.
looks cool. Yeah, like sort of
Solid
bulbous
It was
and
kind of before the Art Deco.
Oh, all right.
Yeah. But it's still pretty
still
cool.
makes hot water.
Oh, yeah. Gas water heater.
It's solid calcium inside there, I'll bet you.
It has a Monel tank.
So is that like glass or what is
It's
that?
like stainless, almost like stainless steel.
Got it. Excellent. Well, let's move on to another topic. But we're going to stick with the idea of conditioning. So in our area here, we have a lot of houses with crawl spaces or combination foundations with some crawl space and some basement, and then we'll have a lot of additions end up over crawl spaces. And typically you'll find crawl space conditions to run from really awful to pretty nice. So I guess my question for you guys is, what do you ever go into a crawl space that to do so would exceed the standards, meaning technically the space isn't big enough to get in, technically it's too low?
I mean, I always try to.
Yeah, I mean, I
I mean,
think
if it's covered in a
If-
lot of feces and, you know, it just, you feel like you're gonna come out covered in a lot more than you went into it.
I think if you can get
there's
into
a
the
line.
space, you should, because if you don't, that's where the problem is.
Right, it's like getting on a roof, right? I mean, if
Yeah.
you don't get up there, you know you're gonna see something. If
So in a traditional crawl space, it's going to be ventilated. It's going to have foundation openings with screened vents that are ideally adjustable. What do you tell your client when they have sort of a traditional crawl space, Jim?
Get it conditioned.
What do you mean?
I mean, we're going to put a really good, well-sealed vapor barrier down, vapor and soil gas barrier. And it'll be sealed to the walls or any piers in the crawl space posts. And then we're going to insulate the exterior walls and we're going to dump a little heating and cooling in there. And it'll be inside the building envelope. So the floors that you're walking on are not like an outside wall. They're inside the house instead of outside.
Sounds ingenious. Sounds like green building. What do you do though when you have situations where financially that just doesn't make sense? Like some crawl spaces, you're not going to be able to do that too.
So, why wouldn't you be able to? The size of the crawl space or just the owner's budget, maybe?
The age of the crawl space.
Yeah, the age of the crawl space, you know,
So
the type of
like
foundation.
you're just not gonna be able to seal it up.
houses from the 1800s, 1900s have had their, well, more like a cellar, but or a deep crawl space. They've conditioned those.
Yes.
My crawl space runs from 18 inches to 9 inches. You physically cannot get, you can't get there, much less actually work to condition it.
How old is your house, Dave?
1850, 170 odd years.
So there's that.
There are exceptions.
Challenge accepted. I'm a skinny guy. I get into tight little spaces.
Oh,
I've been
boy,
known to
Just like-
crawl into really crazy places.
you
So-
get in, but you won't come out.
Conditioning the crawl space is definitely ideal. What do you tell your clients when you can't get into that crawl space? What sort of disclaimers do you have in your report about what was inspected, what wasn't inspected, what your limitations are? And do you make a big deal out of that? Or do you sort of inform them and move on?
I scream bloody murder and note it in bold print several times in the report when you're looking, you know, a crawl space that's 3 to 4 inches. Joists are just about on the dirt. Scream bloody murder. You're buying a risk. Not that you don't want to buy the house, but you're buying a risk that is impossible to evaluate.
I think that's a good way to put it, that you're there to help as a risk assessor, and in some circumstances, there's no information you can really give them. They're gonna have to just decide whether they're okay accepting that risk themselves.
That's correct. Absolutely correct.
So Dan Martin is making a comment here about once you've encapsulated the crawl space, you can't see the foundation. You can't inspect for termites.
Some insulators will leave a gap at the top of the insulation, right below the
Sill
plate,
plate.
the sill plate, mud sill. And some of them spray right over it. And they let the pest control people worry about it.
But
So
when,
it
when,
happens either way, and either way, it works.
when we finish the interior of a basement, we have the same situation.
So yeah, insulation running all the way up to the bottom of the floor joist and drywall running up to the
Yeah.
bottom of the floor joist is really the same thing, right?
Same thing.
Yeah.
And if it's conditioned, we've improved it as much as we can in that sense.
And then there are houses where, you know, you have a basement and they spray foam the entire band joist. And then you have your wall insulation going up to that, right?
And your report should absolutely note very specifically and clearly the limitations of your inspection. Your inspection of the foundation was limited by the interior finishes and or insulation.
Yep.
You can't see it, so you know, but you need to document it very clearly.
Yep.
Hey, Dan Blum, do you want to unmute your mic and explain what you were talking about there with insulating the exterior of the crawl space walls?
In situations where it's just not physically easy or practical to insulate the interior walls, you can insulate the exterior with foam board and cover that with some type of waterproof covering, dry bit or, you know, ethos or something like that. I wouldn't put it over the framing though.
You wouldn't what? What was the last thing you said, Dan?
Oh, I wouldn't put EIFS insulation over the wood framing.
So EIFS is
I
good
can
for,
hear the termites clapping.
right, EIFS is good for a concrete foundation, but nothing above the water table, so to speak.
The zero energy houses and stuff, they're slapping the eaves on, but you've got a separation between the insulation and the ground, so you can monitor that. That's the hot ticket, is to slap eaves on the outside of the net zero homes. It's the only way to get them that, the insulation and air tightness. And again, you're between a rock and a hard place.
So we're going to move on to another topic. Roof inspections. The standard allows for a variety of ways to inspect a roof. Jim, what's your most common way of inspecting, and what do you do when you can't access the roof?
Depends on the roof. I still go on roofs, some of them, not all of them, depending on pitch and how high the roof is off the ground. Super big roofs, I'll call in roof inspector and have him check it out. Or if they're super steep and I can't see all the entire roof covering, I'll have the roof inspector come out and check it.
And when you say roof inspector, is that a roofing contractor that you know, or someone that specializes in roof inspections?
He
Or?
specializes in roof inspections, yep. He's also now getting his Class A license to do roof replacement, but for years he was a roof inspector and did minor roof repairs. Usually I just look at the roof. I will put up a pole camera if I need to and get pictures.
Well, Jim, I noticed you commented about how high the roof is. I mean, what difference does it make how high it is, as long as you don't fall off?
Well, as long as you don't fall off, it doesn't make any difference, does it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of, have you
How low do you bounce?
have you ever
That's the
fallen
other-
off the roof?
No.
I've fallen from one roof down to the next one. That's because I had my telesteps up on a cedar roof, and it.
Yeah,
Slip
yeah,
down.
yeah.
Ooh, bad move.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Sorry, but well, I guess
was
you know that now.
Wood shake roof, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I try to get on a roof if it's safe. I probably push the limit more than what I hear from other inspectors, but I, trust me, I value my safety and my body is my tool, right? So if if I hurt myself, I'm not working tomorrow. So I really have to keep that in mind as well. But I almost, when I find myself questioning, can I get on this roof? And I know it's safe and I can figure out maybe it's using 2 ladders to kind of do a little 2-step. I call it the 2-step, which I know is not necessarily OSHA approved or whatever else. But boy, I almost always find some good items up there that maybe you would have seen it with a drone. I don't know. Maybe you would have seen it just from going into the attic or from the ground, but I find that it's often worth the effort. It also tends to be greatly appreciated by the client. But you still have to be really careful. I'm not encouraging anyone to get on a roof if that's not what you want to do.
And in 20 years, you'll be using a pole camera, and in 30, you'll be using one.
So
That's true.
as long as we're talking about falling off of roofs, I would just share this short anecdote. The very first Nova ASHI meeting I ever attended 23 or 24 years ago, whatever it was, there was a member who showed up at that meeting. Some of you, Jim, you might remember. I
Dave
don't.
Drury.
No,
Dave
it was somebody
Drury.
else. No,
was-
it wasn't Dave. It was someone I'd never met. It was my first meeting, but anyway, he was well liked. Apparently, he was well known and well liked. And- don't say that. You're on television. And but anyway, the guy, the president gave him the floor. He said, this friend of ours has asked for a moment to address the chapter. So the guy got up and he explained. He said, "This is my last meeting." He said, "You all know that a few months ago I fell off a roof and was injured, and so I'm retiring. That's my last inspection. The one that I fell off the roof is the last inspection of my career. So this is my last Nova ASHI meeting. I came here to do two things. One is to say goodbye, and the other is to just simply give you one quick admonition, and that is workers' compensation."
Man, I remember that. Yeah.
Now, when you say workers' compensation, I mean, like I have an S corp, and so I have disability insurance that I buy every month, but it doesn't kick in for 3 months, and it only pays about 60%. Are you talking about something specific?
Okay, so let's talk. This is where we're going off script here a little bit, but and I'm not an insurance agent, but I have,
What you look like?
but
You pretend to be one?
I have spent decades having insurance policies in particular workers' comp. So when I was a contractor, I actually used my workers' comp multiple times when people were injured on the job, nail gun injuries and different things. And so the law, as I understand it, in many states, if not most states, require that if you have more than 3 employees or some minimum number of employees, I think in Virginia it's 3. If you have more than 3 employees, you're required to carry workers' comp on your employees. And it's understood that it doesn't cover the company owner, it covers the employees. However, if you request from your insurance agent that you be covered also, they will include you. Now, if you're a corporation, you are an employee, right? But if you're a sole proprietor, you have to ask for to be included, but they will include you. Obviously, you'll pay a fee for it. But I have I've been a small business owner for 50 years, 48 years, and I've always carried workers' comp on all of my employees and myself the entire time.
That's helpful to know, because I was under the impression that as the president of my S corp, I was never going to get covered by workman's comp, and I only have one other employee, and that's my wife. And my suspicion would be, 1, she doesn't need it, and 2, they wouldn't take a claim from her either. But I guess I'll ask my agent about that.
So I do remember that Dave Drury, when he fell off the ladder, I think not off the roof, did have what
Disability.
disability, and his policy covered everything. Every single penny.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, so you got to look at your policy and see what it covers.
Well, it covered his medical, but it didn't cover loss of income and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, it covered all his medical.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's what I meant. Yeah.
Yeah, the
But
disability.
best of my
I
knowledge,
have-
you
Might
can
be a
get
good
disability,
topic for everything.
a workers' comp, excuse me.
Say what, Larry?
I didn't say anything.
Oh, somebody said something.
JT, I said that this may be a good topic for us to go off on sometime about workman's comp and other type of insurance rather than the regular EEO stuff.
Yes, the only caveat to that is we wouldn't get CEs for it. But we're gonna move on to something else. We're still on roofing though, so some of us get up on the roof, some of us look at it from the ground with binoculars. As long as you're stating what it is and how you did it, I think that you're gonna cover yourself. The main thing would be is anywhere you can't see, you want to make sure that you state that you could not see this part because of limited access or conditions or whatever they may be. As far as roofing materials go, mostly we see asphalt shingle and a lot of membrane roofs. With the membrane roofs, you've got EPDM,
EPDM,
TPO. Built up roofs are kind of a membrane.
modified bit.
Yep,
bit.
that's in the
That's a
same sort
membrane.
of category. What do you tell your clients when they have a modified bitumen roof covering that's been coated with silver aluminumized paint?
I tell them I can't see it. I can see the coating. And I tell them it's probably near end of life.
So just recoat it and move on?
Keep recoating it. You can get that white
Daco, yeah.
silicone 50-year coating, lifetime coating.
It's pretty interesting stuff.
Yeah, it
It does
is.
work. It's expensive.
Yeah.
Flex Seal.
A 5-gallon
Hey, come
drum
on.
and just a big
It
roller.
floats too.
55-gallon drum Flex Seal.
You can
Yeah.
make a boat.
So yeah, they have really good roof cuttings now, but I don't know who's installed modified bitumen in the last whatever, because we've been installing EPDM.
Yeah,
We've been installing EPDM for over 20 years, I think, and TPO now for what, 10?
I'll see a lot of modified in like the DC row houses. That's a really
Yeah.
common place for it.
Occasionally see built up.
Yeah. As far as metal roofing goes, probably the most common is the standing seam, but you also might see a soldered seam like with the copper or some of the older tin, I guess, maybe, but what they were. With the standing seam roofs, one of the things I run into is the roofer will run the crimper on it and get one crimp on the panel. But it just has that sort of L shape. And it's my understanding that you're supposed to put the second crimp and make a submersible seam, essentially the seam that when the snow's melting, it's not going to leak in and get back down. But I have a lot of roofing contractors, when I say, hey, it doesn't have a double crimp on it, they're reluctant to do it. And I just found out today that some of them are reluctant to do it because when they run the seamer down the next time, the pre-finished aluminum panel creases, and now you have these like aluminum silver lines where you had a green roof or a brown roof or a black roof or whatever. As far as copper roofs, what do you tell your clients when they have a flat lock copper roof, and what kind of maintenance should they expect on that?
Get further review by a roofing contractor.
Well, it's already an expensive house,
I
right?
know, I'm
So-
just kidding.
No, I think the thing with soldered seams is the temperature changes in the winter when you have part of the roof is covered in snow and part of it's hot because the sun's on it, that those pans are going to move, and
Right.
solder seams are just going to need, routine maintenance. There's some applications where they don't make sense.
If a soldered seam fails, it's visible, and they don't typically fail, and the expansion and contraction in a properly installed roof, and you're talking probably an old roof. I don't know that they're putting flat seam. Well, I don't know. Never inspected $20 million houses either. But if a soldered seam fails, you'll see it.
The one thing that my roofing friend tells me all the time is we'll go look at roofs and there'll be a soldered seam and they'll just come back and hit it with some sort of silicone sealant or Flex Seal or whatever, which then just contaminates the joint and prevents a traditional nicely stitched repair. But
That's like putting tar on it. That's horrible. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
You can though put the Daco on it over like a copper roof and it'll do the same as it does for modified. What's there's a Roof Max. Have you heard the ads for Roof Max? It's some coating that they're putting on.
Shingles.
Yeah.
Oh, I've seen this. They're spray painting The roof
with just like a thick
with
coat
some
of
kind
whatever, liquid Flex Seal.
something. Yeah, I've seen this. This is like stupid. It's
That,
stupid.
that's what I think, yeah. But you can buy a franchise if you want. I'm sure parts of like somewhere are available.
Gonna cost you.
Now. Uh,
Maybe.
I need a cheap roof.
aside
got
from
one
the
for you.
roofing material, what do you inspect, what do you look for with the flashings? And what do you see, what are your like 2 or 3 problem areas with flashing that you see most often?
Chimney flashing. Probably the worst.
Kick out flashing?
Kick out.
Kick-out flashing is even worse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Deteriorated plumbing stacks.
Who's
Oh,
the-
yeah, the boots, especially, I mean,
Was that
What
Larry?
makes, what makes that kick out flashing so important?
So I saw it today, so the
the roof's fine, but the siding's.
where you have a roof
can't-
line that intersects with the wall and the wall continues, that water is gonna run down and it runs behind the gutter. The gutter can't collect all that water. And when it's not doing that, then it's gonna start getting into whatever your exterior finish is. So if you've got stone or stucco or eaves,
Or even vinyl.
even vinyl.
Really?
And so just a little piece of kick out to knock it into the gutter and away from the wall is essential to sort of keeping that kind of deterioration from happening. You can also see it where it just runs streaks down it. So if you're looking at a house and you see a line coming down the siding right below the gutter where all that water is just getting behind it and coming down, that's a clue that there needs to be some kick out there.
Yeah, with that in mind, just on a slight tangent with sideways discharge, like if you're looking at an upper roof section and maybe like a large dormer that discharges, an upper gutter discharges onto a lower roof, and instead of it discharging downwards, it's shooting out to the side of the roof. Do you raise any concerns with that, with it? You've got major flow going sideways on an asphalt shingle?
Jerry up in Pennsylvania. What's his name, Hollis? Jerry? The roof guy?
Jerry up in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, Jerry
What does
PA.
What does he
He
say?
says it's got to point straight down. It doesn't go,
No cross.
it doesn't go
sideways.
sideways.
Yeah,
That makes sense.
I think that's good advice.
I don't
What-
like make a huge deal, but
I don't either.
it's, you know.
The other
Perfect
thing about the
location.
kick-out flashing is that it actually channels the water into the wall. If it's not kicking out, that that sidewall flashing is terminating behind the siding, and that water is going behind the siding, and it
Yeah.
destroys everything. Any
If there's
kind of
no kick-
siding.
No kick out, yeah. If there's just flashing coming down.
What about drip edge? Do you, I mean, I see that with gutters and you see stains coming behind the gutter on,
Yeah.
you know, on the
Yeah.
fascia or whatever. That's an easy oversight, or it's tucked behind the gutter. The gutter's been sandwiched up to the drip edge instead of
The drip
ideally
edge in the
overlapping.
gutter,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes it's not an issue, but it's not ideal.
Is there a question there, Hollis?
Yeah, there's a question asking about the size of kickouts.
What's the minimum code requirements, 4x4? I think.
I'm,
Pretty sure it's 4x4.
4x4 is what I prefer. I 4 inches going up the wall, at least, I would say.
Well, I know that James Hardy, I'm pretty sure James Hardy says 4x4, and I thought there was a code requirement for 4x4. Or maybe that's just a common sense requirement.
Well,
Larry's
you
gonna
know,
look it
it's
up
funny
right
because
now.
the code doesn't really specify the kick out flashing itself, you know. They just say
Is
it has to drain to the exterior.
I
So
think
kick
the
out-
code may have a requirement for kickouts now.
Yeah, I think it is a code requirement where you have a
Pretty sure
roof
it is.
line intersecting a wall that continues.
Yeah.
But we'll figure that one out and get back to you about it.
Yeah.
Do all houses need gutters?
Where are they?
Yes.
Where are they?
No.
The
Here
gutters?
or in Arizona or New Mexico? Or
They're here.
I would say almost all of them do.
Yeah, I think if you're really focusing on good water management around the exterior of a home, unless it's Unless it's like, Swiss chalet where it's an A-frame coming right down to the ground kind of a thing. But at that point, you still have to manage that water.
There are some houses that have really decent overhangs,
Yep.
Yeah.
and
And
I
then-
would probably say, you know what, it's gonna be okay without a gutter.
Sometimes you'll see like a ground gutter, essentially all the water comes off, it falls in a specific spot, and then there's a perforated drain and collection system and.
I think it's a bad idea personally. It's bound to fail at some point. Why not have a gutter and just get that water away?
Well, but then you gotta clean those gutters and the snow
Well-
comes and it pushes them all out of the
Okay, so
way.
how about protecting your foundation, protecting your basement,
Well,
your
what
crawl
if-
space, all
what
that
if-
stuff? I mean,
So, the
a
big,
gutter can,
Well, let's
go a
just
long
start,
way.
let me just say, this is my house we're talking about. And
ah,
I'm taking it personally that you're
This is
telling
per-
me I
oh,
have to
great.
have gutters, because I don't have gutters. And I'm
Good
okay with
overhangs?
it. Yeah,
yeah, so the biggest problem with gutters is they're too small.
yeah, you need to put like a real gutter on there.
Like yeah, with all the trees around, it's like whoever's putting the gutters on doesn't look to see that there are trees up there. And they put on the smallest gutter they can because that's the cheapest one and that's what people want. And then they end up with gutters that have to be cleaned every other day.
What do you tell your clients when there's gutter covers, or when they want gutter covers, or when there aren't gutter covers?
I tell them, I don't know of any gutter guard system that's maintenance free. There's all kinds of gutter guards out there. Some work better than others, but they all require maintenance.
Yep, I basically say I have yet to see a perfect gutter guard.
Yeah, any sort of labor saving device isn't really.
I mean, the gutter helmets, the solid covers, I've seen problems with those, especially in the spring with like the oak tassels and things
Yeah.
like that.
Well, and when that leading edge, that bullnose
Gets
gets dirty,
That- yeah,
now
that's
it
what I'm talking
becomes a
about.
nucleation point for
Exactly.
just running right off of there.
Some of the other ones, I mean, some of the newer ones, that's kind of a fine mesh, it seems to work pretty well, but pine
They
needles,
have
are always-
issues.
I know they have issues.
And even with sheet flow, I mean, once if
Right.
it's really flowing.
Exactly. So, yeah, I bet to see a perfect one.
What about those really nice, like traditional half round gutters with the clips and the little anchor spots? What do you tell your clients when they have
The pretty
a really exactly
Are they copper or aluminum?
copper?
copper.
Oh, they're nice.
Mine are galvanized.
There you
Yeah,
go.
galvanized-
That's because you can pick
galvanized
those
is
up
good
at the Tractor Supply.
No, not the full length solder joints and stuff. And, but I will say that, out of the 170 years of the house, it's now had gutters on it for 2.
Wow.
So it got 168 and the crawl space was dry.
You're just dragging it into the 20th century.
That's
You get up there,
impressive.
you get up there and
Kicking
clean them
and
yet,
screaming.
Dave? You clean them yet, Dave?
Oh, well, no, of course not. The wind does that.
There you go.
That half round doesn't hold as much, so
No, it doesn't. Doesn't have all the,
You
you
can,
know,
you can get the
crosses
big
up
half.
top.
Yeah. Oversized.
when at least with new construction in Montgomery County and DC and Arlington, they all have various versions of a stormwater management system. Often a dry well or sometimes a rain garden,
Eco gardens,
uh,
bio gardens,
a cistern.
biomass.
What do you tell your client when they're buying a new home that has one of these things? Do they have any responsibility for maintaining it, for checking it, or can they just ignore it for the rest?
I don't
of
know
it?
about DC and Montgomery, but Arlington does have, yeah, they have to send pictures into that department every year. And every
Pictures
some
of what, like
of
down
the,
in
of the rain, the rain garden,
oh, right,
the rainwater management thing that the roof drains into. They have to send pictures in every year, and every so many years, the biomass and those things has to be completely changed.
Yeah,
And
that's the big part of it is, especially if you don't have gutter guards. I mean, that's a good time to have gutter guards, is to help protect that system. Cause you're gonna, it's like a rain barrel. People love rain barrels, but boy, those things are just, they're
gotta use
a
them.
cesspool and mosquito magnet unless they're used properly, right?
In Montgomery County, they have a requirement now where the downspout has to have a leaf collector built into it that you can clean
The
out.
leaf filter, the one that shoots the leaves out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but when it gets
Right.
clogged, then the water just shoots. I just
I-
don't
trust me, I
understand
know.
those things.
And
Those-
I have yet to see a nice one because they look horrible. They look like those those Homer sort of extension tail pieces for the underneath your plumbing.
Yeah, I see those.
I'm going to invite everybody to think for a minute. And what I want to do is go back about 5 minutes in this conversation to where Alan was asking about the gutters, and what about no gutters and have a drainage system built in around the perimeter below grade, a French drain in essence below grade, a couple inches below grade. And Mark, your response was, I don't like that, but I suspect that you're not liking it was theoretical rather than practical. Let me pose the question.
Yeah,
for you,
okay, yeah.
Okay.
Can't wait.
Because maybe you do have something
Yeah,
more than, okay. But so my question
Passionate.
is, and you can go ahead and give that response
for it,
too.
go for it.
Okay. But the question I want to get at is how do we deal with our opinions? Is it appropriate for us to be giving our opinions, especially when our opinions are based on limited information? Like somebody, I mean, it's one thing for somebody to ask you, what do you think about it? But it's another thing to see something and think to yourself, I don't have a lot of confidence in this. And now I'm going to share my lack of confidence in this system with my client, when it may actually be that this system, I just unfamiliar with it. It may be like the latest, greatest thing. And I've actually given my client, kind of steered him in the wrong direction based on my limited knowledge impacted by my opinion. And I just wonder if people want to weigh in on that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I would. So my concern, and it's actually one of my biggest pet peeves is water management on the exterior of a home. So obviously most issues you see in a crawl space that are water related or foundation, it all starts on the outside. Almost always starts at the downspout or in an area of the gutters that are, historically clogged and overflowing. And my concern specifically with just letting the water drain to the soil right off a roof is it is going to, it's going to create a channel there, right? Over time, it's going to cavitate that soil. And most homes, well, any home with a basement or any kind of foundation, the soil is going to be disturbed more around that foundation. And so you have the virgin soil next to it, and then you have the disturbed soil, and you can't fully compact that when it's being built. It's difficult. It tends to settle over time, which can magnify the issue. But typically, if water is given a chance to perk close to the foundation, it's going to go back towards the foundation because
The big hole in the ground.
it's softer there, right? And especially if it's been like that for a long time, it's going to be more channelized, and the water is going to be easier access. So with that in mind, my bias is I try to educate my clients, and I say, look, if we don't see a problem in the crawl space or see a problem in the basement, I'm going to say, look, I don't see an issue here. If it's a newer home, I'm going to say it's possible that this really nice drain tile that's been designed with the foundation is acting as maybe your plan A or plan B with your drainage. It really should be your plan C. Eventually, it's going to start to clog or get compromised. So let's deal with it before it even gets there.
But I think maybe what House was also suggesting, though, is when you as the inspector insert doubt or ignorance or lack of confidence into something that you're talking about, how does that affect the information that the client is taking in? And then on another level, how does that affect the transaction when these are, significant things? You run into a situation and you're not really sure. You start talking kind of.
Right. Well, and I think you need to be open about it. Like, I can't see this. I don't see a problem. But I do like to share some of the basic theories, and it may or may not apply, but if I wouldn't bring it up unless I'm thinking that it probably applies in this scenario. But I don't like to be an alarmist by any means. And there's no benefit in doing that either. But again, we have to educate our clients not only for what we're seeing right now, but what could happen down the line if they're going to own the house for a while. And so I try to say, look, this could be improved so that we may not have a problem now, but it's pretty good chances that you could, or maybe you won't, but put in a leader on your downspout or pipe it underground, and now you've got more confidence, peace of mind.
So Mike Wright, do you have your hand up? Mike Wright? Who's that with their hand up?
One of my favorite things is, especially like I hear a realtor say, oh, it doesn't matter about the downspout. It's on slab. There's no basement. And I say,
Yeah,
well,
right.
now the water really doesn't have to travel as far down before it starts to affect the foundation. It's almost, it's counterintuitive, but a garage slab, a driveway, or just a house on slab or any section of the house, it's easier for it to actually get compromised.
I've seen rotten trim from water wicking through the corner, concrete at the corner, and
Yeah.
rotted the trim inside the house.
Yeah,
Yeah. So if you have enough water sitting by that concrete,
yeah.
it's gonna wick in, eventually rot the trim. So
Water is the enemy everywhere.
It's also the key to life.
Well, it is, but you got to find a balance. It's not key to life of the house, so.
right.
All right, we got another.
Yeah, I'm gonna
Ready to
take
take
us,
it now.
so, we'll stick with wet basements and foundation drainage system.
Oh, boy.
Oh, Lord.
Here we
Um,
go.
So,
Hit it with a bang.
older house, pre-1970s, let's say, there's no foundation drainage system, there's no sump pump. There's probably a couple of floor drains that are connected to the sewer, maybe one outside the basement door. But the client says, I gotta have a sump pump, because I had this experience. And what do you tell them when they don't need one?
So you want a sump pump? Get a sump pump. I don't care. It makes you feel better. It's your house.
Do you ever
Absolutely put one in.
Do you ever get called out to troubleshoot a situation after, and we'll just use B-Dry as an example, has been there and quoted them a $15,000 foundation drainage system when that's not actually what they need?
Are you talking about like an interior trench gutter
Yeah.
system? Yeah, that would be right. Okay, so honestly, I feel bad for people that spend the money on that. Because if you're spending 5,000, 10,000, 15,000, if you put that into the exterior and redo the grading and your downspouts, compaction, whatever, you can go a long way with $15,000. And now you're protecting your foundation. If you're collecting it after it comes through the foundation and under the footer or set, I mean, what's the point? It's a Band-Aid. It's not even really doing a whole lot.
It's saying it's okay for water to come inside, we'll just pump it
Yeah,
out.
what is it? Right, exactly. What are they really addressing? Air quality inside the
Tell
house?
people, you really don't want water running through your foundation wall. They say, let it run through, we'll pump it out. They'll punch holes in all the block cores to let it run through. And
Yeah.
put the drain system in and it'll be 10, 12, 14, 15, $16,000. And, 5 years later, the inspector shows up. There's no water in the sump. It's completely dry.
Well, okay, and then let's talk about, not to get off on a tangent, but let's talk about radon. Now, all of a sudden, you've really opened your foundation up to even just a sump pit, if it's
You've got the wall
or what?
going all the way around.
so it can just breathe all the way around.
Yeah.
So that's another thing that I try not to get negative, but if it's existing, then I just let people know, look, have a radon monitor or make sure you're having a radon test done. But even then, a standard test is just a snapshot in time. Better to have a constant monitor. They're cheap. They're cheaper than most certified tests, and they're pretty darn accurate. But you want to know.
Do you ever have agents, and we provide radon testing as one of our services, so we'll typically ask, because there's nothing worse than showing up to an inspection and they want radon and you don't have a kit with you. And so, but we have several agents who either don't believe in radon or are convinced that there's no radon in Georgetown or no radon on Capitol Hill.
Yeah.
How do you handle people's ignorance around radon?
Well, personally, I just let them talk and then I just share my opinion afterwards. And sometimes it's usually an agent that I haven't worked with before, but and you have to tread lightly, right? You don't want to embarrass them, but you run across this with all sorts of topics. But I let them know why I think it's important. So,
Battery die?
That's what they're saying.
Oh.
They're saying they can't hear you. But that's all.
yeah, they can hear you. I think so. What do you do, Jim?
Do you believe in radon?
Yeah, of course I do. Do I believe in agents that know what they're talking about? Not so much.
Yeah.
Oh,
You got to talk right into
I
it.
gotta talk right.
You're not
Why don't
going to
you
hear
give
it
me a
though.
good one. Oh, let's buy some new mics here. Yeah, so yeah, I believe in radon, and if someone starts saying something different, that's or puppy or whatever. Yeah, say it's comes out of the ground and it's everywhere in the world.
Yeah, it is.
Everywhere.
Yep.
Pretty much. And there's certainly plenty of it in this area. Gets closer you get to the mountains, worse it gets.
Yeah, it's a leading cause of lung cancer in non-smokers in the US. So that should raise a little bit of concern.
You would think.
Well, and we are definitely a hot spot here in the Mid-Atlantic. I mean, there's,
Virginia's a hot.
yeah,
Virginia's a red state.
and in the testing that we do, we've noticed that like up the Potomac River Valley, anything that's sort of close to it, so McLean, Great Falls, Poolsville, Darnestown, there's just a ribbon running
Yeah.
up through there.
I live in Darnestown, bought in 2000, before I was an inspector, had a test done in the summertime and it was like 2 something. I did a test, probably 10, 12 years ago under it was the winter time, wood stove was cranking, probably like the worst conditions in terms of creating low pressure in your house. And I had a 60. I've never heard of a 60 before, but I had a 60 and we had an abatement system installed, 3 days later. And within 2 days after that, it was down to a 1.5 and it basically stays there. But the monitor's good to see it kind of go up and down with wet soil conditions. I mean, there's so much that can play into.
Barometric pressure.
Yep.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I had a 74 once in that, but mine are typically not that high there. And
What's your house?
my house actually, so interesting. So we built a new house in 2007. So we dug a new foundation and, for the first 10 years, it was reliably below 4.0. And then at some point, because we'll test the house regularly as part of our QA/QC, it crept up and we started getting 5s regularly. And then my wife was finally like, I'm calling John Sweat. And
Yeah.
now we have a system.
It's good company.
So
The
guys,
biggest,
can I jump in?
Yeah.
Danny, hey, as far as radon, if you've done anything over testing around Kemp Mill and down Kemp Mill Road and back between Arcola and Randolph Road, there is a lot of high areas back there. You can walk into the woods in those areas and find mica. And it is a sure thing that you're going to come out with a high radon reading. I came out with 121 at one point. 121. It killed the canisters. I had to go get long-term ones to test. I thought I'd actually done something wrong.
No, that's funny. It's good to hear, Danny.
we were trying to put you in the hot seat up here, but
Yeah.
I guess that didn't work out.
Well, I don't want to be in the hot seat, gang.
This is great. We're just.
Yeah,
Shooting
actually,
the
you
shit.
guys, doing this roundtable is good.
Yeah. Thank you.
Jim, can we hear you?
I don't know. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yes, that's better.
Excellent. Well, it's good to have Jim back live and in full volume because he's so verbose. You don't want to miss
want the
a
other mic.
second of what he has to say. Let's move on to interior piping distribution systems.
Ooh.
We can talk about lead, big blue, galvanized, you know. Actually, when I first started, I would see the big blue like a couple of times. I have not seen that in
So
over
you're
a
talking
decade.
about Big Blue coming in as
Yeah.
a main, yeah.
So where it would rupture and
Yep,
shear
yep.
and
Yeah, I've only seen that personally over in the what's the name of the road? Silver Spring, kind of getting closer to like Brookville. It doesn't matter. Corona? No, not Corona. Is that a road out there? Yeah. I think it's a beer name. I'm not sure. I think it's
So I think
that's where I've seen it in those neighborhoods.
so when you use the term big blue, I think you need to be clear that what you're talking about is polybutylene.
right. It's a specific kind of polybutylene. And there are blue supply pipes that are not that. Is that what you're getting at? Or
Well, yes, I've seen PEX as blue
Yep.
as a water service entrance pipe.
Yep.
It's rare. So you got to be careful. You start calling PEX polybutylene.
you're not going to see PEC. You're not going to see PECs on an older home, most likely.
2001, 2002, 2003, somewhere around
Yeah,
there.
maybe that. Yep.
What else?
Well, in DC, you know, you can go online and see where DC Water thinks the lead pipes are.
Hmm.
And oftentimes they don't realize that they've actually replaced that service. So you'll have clients that show up and say, this house has a lead service. And you go down and be like, well, not here it doesn't. And if it's not here and it's not at the crock, I'm not sure where that lead service is. But how can you tell, what's the standout indicator of when you have a lead service?
Looks like lead, tastes like lead.
The little sweetness?
Yeah.
It typically has that sort of bulbous end to it before it gets to the
Yeah.
to the water valve there,
They call that a wiped joint.
Yes.
because it's just kind of
I think that's what they wiped it when they did the installation. They wiped it to make it round like that.
got it.
I don't know why they call soldered joints sweat joints. Maybe from the torch heats up the plumber and the plumber sweats. I'm not sure.
Because it melts the solder.
But why do you call it a sweat joint?
I don't know, because you're sweating it.
Because
You're heating it up.
Yeah, because
I thought Dave might jump in on this one.
Because you're sweating it. You're sweating it and hoping it doesn't leak.
Go ahead, Dave.
You're heating it up.
but what is, I guess, so when you heat stuff up, it sweats
When you're warm, do you sweat?
profusely.
There you go.
Right.
Don't look
Hollis,
too
what
deep into some of this stuff.
What does the end say?
You're liquefying the solder.
Yeah.
All sorts of ways to get to sweat.
Yeah.
And the
Right.
Ian had noted the flux looks like it's sweating while it's heating because it will, kind of run out.
It does, yep, it sort of liquefies as
That's
well.
Right.
No, it's when you've got the torch on a cold water pipe and you've got the flame there, you're going to get condensation on the outside of the pipe, thus making the pipe sweat.
True. If the pipe is cold.
Oh, don't
Well,
even start.
What? What other? We have CPVC. Right?
Yeah.
So is CPVC the new polybutylene?
Yeah.
You think?
I believe there are chemicals that leach out of CPVC. I wouldn't have it in my house.
It gets brittle.
It does get
brittle,
brittle.
yeah.
Yes, it does get brittle.
Do you tell that to
Uh,
people,
it's-
Jim? Every time you see CPVC in a house, is that what you tell them?
Yeah, sure. Sure, Larry. I just say I wouldn't have this shit in my house. No, don't do that. It just goes in the report because all the new houses have CPVC. You know, it's like, hey, you people want cheap stuff? You're going to get cheap stuff.
So elaborate on that. What do you say? If you see CPVC, you don't see anything wrong with it. you describe it as CPVC interior distribution pipe, but how do you elaborate on that? What do you tell people?
That's it.
You don't share.
I
with them-
don't go into any song and dance about, I don't like this pipe. It leaches chemicals into the water. You don't want it in your house. You need to change this to PEX or copper. It turns brittle. It's going to be a huge problem one of these days. I don't do any of that.
What
I
if-
just tell them what they have. CPVC. It's not leaking. What does the standard say? The standard says describe it and note any problems, right?
Well,
And,
let's say
and
your
not
client-
interject personal opinions.
Well, but
Exactly.
so, I don't know if the standard says don't interject personal opinions, does it?
Well, we're there to give our professional opinion,
Yeah.
right?
Um,
Not our personal opinion, our
but what do
professional
you do
opinion.
when the client is buying a 3, 4, 5, $1 million house, custom builder, got fancy stuff everywhere.
They should
And,
use copper.
and then it's
Should
got
use copper.
CPVC. What do you tell your client? You're like, well, it was a budget decision on the builder's part. There's nothing wrong with it.
No,
Why are you
yeah.
doing that then? Why are you doing that? Why are you telling them? Why
Because
would
they're
you?
asking, they say, well, how come I don't have copper? Well, copper's more expensive. And then I tell them
Well,
all,
a builder's going to spec that. And so I would expect my customers, the buyer, to already know what it's going to be plumbed with.
Right.
I guess if you're in a custom situation. But a lot of times the client, now we're getting into sort of a different realm, but the client will have an expectation on the house they're buying, and the windows aren't
The
good grade.
windows are builder grade. The plumbing is builder grade. The carpet is
Only the
builder grade.
kitchen. The kitchen and the bathrooms are not builder grade. Everything else is
So I
builder
think
grade.
what we're getting at here is that if we recognize that our client has a reason to have an expectation of higher quality, and we see lower quality materials used, is it appropriate for us to point that out?
I have looked at people buying fairly large houses and spending a lot of money and thinking they were getting something special. I'm just looking at them and say, hey, this is the same material that you would get in a $250,000 townhouse. This is back when you could get one for $250,000. There's just more of it. That's all. You're buying more. You're not buying perfection here.
And it's, state of the art. What are your choices that are better than CPVC? You can go with,
Copper.
PEX. I see a
PEX.
lot of PEX, but copper, it's just not even out there.
Anybody ever run into brass pipes?
Once.
Me too, once. Over in Alexandria.
Not bad, I mean.
Let's talk about galvanized pipes. What do you tell your client when the house is full of galvanized pipe and the water pressure is low and a little bit rusty?
You're talking about water pressure or water flow? I think you're talking about volume, right?
I guess I am, yes.
Because you could have a little more in a drip and still have good pressure.
Right.
So what I've done for decades now is we'll get to the upstairs. I'll turn the shower on and I'll say, you stand here and watch the shower. And I'll go downstairs and turn on both faucets of the utility sink, full blast, and then let it run for a few minutes and go back upstairs. And they're like,
Where'd
the
the
water
water go?
stopped running. The water stopped running. It started sucking air in the shower head. I was like, there you go. You need a new service line. You need new interior pipes. Yep. It's going to fail. Most of it's failed by now.
If
Most
there's
of there's still a
galvanized
lot
pipe
out
that's
there.
still in place that's from the 40s, 50s, yeah.
It's done.
You're lucky it's still getting any water
Yeah.
out of it.
Yeah.
So what's the standard? I think you have to be able to use 2 fixtures one time.
Which standard is that?
I don't know.
I'd say the standards. of
Maybe it
the
was home.
galvanized
Maybe it was
piping.
Home Pro.
Well,
I
it's
often see it
beyond
like
its
on-
life expectancy and, should be replaced because it can fail disastrously with no warning. It might
Right.
warn you, but it might not, and that's a problem. So,
Yeah.
But the
replace
guy that-
immediately.
The guy that was flipping this house, put all this nice new bathroom in, redid the kitchen,
Galvanized.
but he didn't do
A
the
lot more
piping.
work.
I mean,
That's a flipper.
All right, so Dave, when you say disastrously, we're talking about galvanized pipe, and you're saying there's going to be a disastrous consequence. What's the disaster that you anticipate?
Where the fitting fails and just breaks, and you have water flowing full tilt until someone shuts it off.
So the restricted water flow is an indication of the corrosion in the interior of the pipe, and the wall of the pipe is getting thinner, and it's already thin at the threaded connection. So that's where the failure is likely to take place, is at the threads at the connection, right?
Yes.
So what about the scald hazard implication though? And that's a disaster also, potential.
In terms of people being sprayed with the hot water.
No, we're talking about if you've got galvanized pipes that
Oh
are-
yeah.
water flow is restricted.
Flush the
It takes a
toilet.
few minutes to set the water temperature in the shower because there's such a lag time between when you change the temperature at the valve and when you get the temperature, the desired temperature at the shower head. You get in the shower, somebody flushes a toilet, and suddenly you get blasted with hot water, which is the reason for pressure balanced shower heads.
Yes. Another significant concern. Galvanized pipe replaced.
Galvanized pipes are a safety hazard.
good point, Hollis.
Absolutely.
So on interior piping, Dave mentioned PEX, and I really like PEX. The one thing I don't like is when the plumbers don't plumb it. They just, string it along, run it wherever they can, and it's not,
It's
yeah,
not
it does,
tidy,
it'd
not tidy, yeah.
be nice if it looked a little better.
Yeah.
But it's so forgiving that you don't, and you still got the shape of the coil and you gotta make it work. But you can
So,
see some nice installations.
We kind of touched on this last night, but if the two of you had a house with a well system, what? That's nice. And you had to choose which kind of branch plumbing you would have, what would you
That is a good question, because
what would you prefer?
not CPVC, because that's just gonna accelerate the chemical release process.
I
Okay.
would be good with PEX.
Yeah,
If the water was slightly acidic, it would be eating the copper. PEX are going to be fine.
yeah. Copper is definitely a concern.
And there's probably nothing in well water that's going to bother PEX at all.
And use the plastic fittings, not the brass ones.
So
The newer fitting, there's like,
The expander,
yeah.
the expander.
So obviously, where I'm going with this one is obviously with a well system, you would like to have some kind of treatment. Even with city water, it probably doesn't hurt to have some kind of treatment, neutralizing the acid and softening. But there is a fair argument that copper is better with a well system because it is helping diffuse that reaction over a larger surface area. If that water is going to react with something, right? So if you take all the metal out of the system, then it's going to react really aggressively to your water heater, which does have an anoid, but your valves, plumbing valves, toilet valves, whatever. So is it better to have copper?
But then you get that green stain in the bowl, and
That's
Not necessarily. I've had it 15 years on a well, with potentially acidic water, no pinholes yet, but
yeah.
You don't have the green stains in your fixtures though, do you? I haven't seen them.
no.
No,
But I
so
have,
the
I have
houses that-
inspected homes where in North Warren County, where 10-year-old house, the copper piping just failed and had to be replaced. They had severely acidic water.
Thin
We
wall.
don't have that issue.
L or M
No.
or L, right?
Yeah, so
Letter.
yeah, if you see green stains in the fittings, that's copper oxide. You've got to put in a treatment system. This is just going to eat the
Absolutely.
pipe. And the pipes and the fittings.
So we're gonna turn it over to Hollis here.